Actually, Kang already conquered the Marvel Universe timeline. Let's see what CBR has to say about this and check this out.
The MCU has got a lot of great projects coming out. But don't worry, we'll save you some time. You can just go ahead and skip right over Avengers the Kang Dynasty because, spoiler alert, the dude's already conquered the MCU. Let's take a look at how Kang and his variants have been the overlord of the MCU timeline this whole time. Free will. What a joke, am I right? The heroes and villains of the Avengers plot and plan and strategize only to have themselves pruned if they ever go off script. In Loki Season 1, we learned that a variant of Nathaniel Richards, the real name of Kang the Conqueror, who went by the alias He Who Remains, was in charge of what was known as the Sacred Timeline. This is better known as Earth 616, a universe separated from the rest of the multiverse and looped so that the alternate variants of He Who Remains could not come to be. Simple housekeeping stuff to avoid another multiversal war. This means he was there through it all. Iron Man's escape from the cave, the Avengers standing in a circle, Ultron's birth, and Thanos' quest. He Who Remains was watching it all from the window of his citadel, likely eating an apple. The entire job of He Who Remains was to make sure the loop did not branch off. This way, there were no variants of anyone, but especially himself.
Yes!
Any irregular event had to be eradicated because that event would eventually lead to a different version of Nathaniel Richards being born, one who would ultimately try to usurp He Who Remains. Essentially, He Who Remains ruled over the most powerful throne in existence up until this point. However, if there's one thing Game of Thrones taught us, it's that no throne stays empty for long, unless you get a dragon to burn it down completely after that dragon's owner is killed in the laziest and most rushed season finale of any show ever. Sorry, I blacked out there a little bit. One day, He Who Remains tried to prune the wrong, fiery-tempered female version of the God of Mischief, and that would be his undoing. But he already knew that. He Who Remains even explained to Loki and Sylvie that once he was gone, someone would have to take up his throne. Heck, the dude even offered it to the two gods of mischief who managed to defeat Elias. But when Sylvie's in a stabby mood, there's no stopping her. In the blink of an eye, the entire MCU timeline was rewritten. The only ones who knew what used to be were Loki and Sylvie, who were at the end of time when this reality-shattering event occurred. Based on the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania trailer and the end of Loki Season 1, it would appear that the MCU timeline as we know it has been replaced with one ruled by Kang the Conqueror, the most evil and powerful variant of Nathaniel Richards. So what does this new timeline look like? And what would happen if the Avengers actually defeated Kang? So, now that He Who Remains has a big hole in his heart, what does the quote-unquote sacred timeline look like under Kang the Conqueror? Well, truthfully, I don't think there is one. I think Kang the Conqueror has conquered multiple timelines already that he is allowed to exist. We know this because he asks Ant-Man if he has killed him before. This dude has probably killed an untold number of Avengers in an untold number of universes. And now, without He Who Remains in the way, he's coming for and has already taken over Earth 616, given his statue in the TVA. Does this mean that all of the events that have transpired in the MCU so far didn't occur? Not necessarily. Remember, time's a construct. The entire MCU could have occurred under Kang's rule, and He Who Remains was simply a blip in a spin-off series. However, I think it's safe to assume that while Kang in his own time has been around a while, he's a fresh face to most of the Avengers. I don't believe that means the events we have witnessed so far are any different. In fact, I think Kang would make sure some of them occurred. Speaking of making sure something has occurred, have you subscribed yet? Well, what are you doing? Hit that button now. Huge turning points in the MCU include the foundation of Wakanda when a meteor of vibranium struck Africa 1 million years ago, or the time Tony Stark casually invented time travel. And that's just on Earth. There's also the rise and fall of Asgard, plus the advancements of the Kree. These events seem to be foundational in making sure that a couple thousand years later, Kang the Conqueror would be born. So while he can conquer the timeline, he runs the risk of erasing himself if he actually changes it. The trailer for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania even confirms this. Chronopolis itself seems to have a very Asgardian feel. The buildings and hovering structures seem very similar to the planet Thor once called home, and may be rebuilt again on Earth, where the technology will be much more accessible to a young Nathaniel Richards. Kang's suit itself seems to employ combinations of technology from the Kree and Wakandan nanotech. There's the MODOK suit that is likely made from the old Yellow Jacket outfit with seemingly some stark upgrades. And lastly, there's all of Kang's ships. They seem to be pulled directly from Wakanda. So you see, the Overlord may be new, but up until this point he has had to let things play out the way they were always meant to be. And not just so he could be born, but so that when he was, he would have everything he needed at his fingertips to control any timeline he wanted. Seems pretty impossible to beat him, right? Well, if that were the case, I can't imagine they would go through the trouble of even making the movie. So let's take a look at what happens if and when Kang is actually defeated. The Avengers come together and finally end this Thanos-level threat. But now what? He Who Remains told us that someone has to do the job. Perhaps they find a way to break the wheel, but unless all of space and time are going to end, I can't imagine the wheel stops spinning. So, who fills the seat? Perhaps He Who Remains is reborn, and we get to watch a rerun of the first multiversal war that he won. The universe goes back to the way it was long before Loki visited the TVA, and our heroes are none the wiser. Or perhaps that throne is filled by someone more familiar. Perhaps a phases-old character who has been searching for a throne all his life. That's right, perhaps Loki actually does become the new Master of Time. Though it's a much more level-headed Loki, closer to sacrifice myself for my brother and further away from, hey, let's invade New York. Or better yet, maybe this is how Thor retires. After all, he has seen eternity, done everything he needs in the MCU, but just hasn't found a throne that quite suits him. Perhaps this is it, leaving his daughter to fill his legacy. Or maybe the Hulk. After all, he's one of the smartest and oldest characters left. If the big green guy truly can't die, perhaps it becomes his job to steer time in the right direction. Then there's Doctor Strange, a man with an insane amount of multiversal disaster expertise because he's been responsible for some of them. There's also the chances that Kang is replaced by some omnipotent being. Galactus, the Celestials, maybe even Adam Warlock. However, I think an outside shot to fill the seat of Kang the Conqueror could be Vision. With his memories restored and built with a sophisticated code capable of finding a logical resolution to all things while infusing some humanity, perhaps this android is the best one to become the man behind the curtain, making sure time in the MCU spins on. He needs something to do now that his wife went crazy and dropped a building on herself. Kang may have already won, but hopefully the remaining Avengers pick something up from Steve Rogers and will continue to fight until there's no fight left. Do you think Kang has already won? And if so, how do the Avengers even hope to stop him now?
Subscribe, like this video. Have a great day. See you guys. Bye.